What a beautiful day to be taking a walk with the family in the Arboretum, enjoying the nature that God has blessed us with, the beautiful trees and colors, all the foliage that's finally starting to come to Boston. Yesterday was a beautiful Shabbos. We had a big crowd in Shul, thank God. A lot of people stayed for Kiddush. What a lovely celebration. Yesterday, October 23rd, was 80 years since the Odessa Massacre, when the Germans and the Romanians came in and took over Odessa. The next day, the Russians bombed the Romanian police headquarters in Odessa, killing 67 people. Of course, who do they blame? They blame the Jews, which gave them the free rein to murder and kill so many Jews in that Odessa massacre. They took Jews, they rounded them up, they hung them, they put them into barracks, and then they burned it on fire. One man, one of the only people to survive, was a guy named Mikhail Zaslavsky. He was rounded up with many others in the Odessa massacre, and him and his mother and father and siblings were taken to these barracks. They were doused and put on fire. He managed to break out and escape. His rest of his family wasn't so lucky. All of them were murdered by the Nazis and Romanians. In total, 30,000 Jews were murdered in the Odessa massacres by the Nazis and Romanians. Later on, he ended up escaping to Slobodka, and where he ended up being in the camps in Slobodka. And when Odessa was liberated in 1944, he went on to fight with the Russians and to liberate many cities from the Nazis. And when they asked him, he still lives in Odessa. He came back to Odessa, he lives there, he married a lovely woman, Ira. He had children and grandchildren. They asked him, why does he still live in Odessa? And he said, if I don't live there, who's going to watch over the bones of my family? 80 years later, he's still living in Odessa, one of the only survivors of the Odessa massacre. And it made me think, because this week's Torah portion we read is Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah. And the truth is, we read about Sarah's death and her burial in the cave of Machpelah. But the question, of course, asked by all the rabbis is, why would we call it Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, if really it talks about her death and her passing? And the answer the Rebbe gives in one of his talks, which is so powerful and deep, the Rebbe says, what was Sarah's life all about? It was all about continuity and continuation of her and Abraham's journey to bring monotheism, to bring godliness, to bring morality, to bring kindness and love to this world. And she wanted specifically Isaac to continue this way. And that's why we find two things before. She pleaded with Abraham to send Ishmael away, who was being a bad influence on her son Isaac. And she insisted on finding a match for her son Isaac, and that Isaac will be the inheritor of Abraham's dynasty and not Ishmael. And what happened in this week's Torah portion? The first thing we study about is Abraham buying a plot to bury Sarah in. What does he buy? The first transaction told to us in the Torah, in the land of Israel, is Abraham buying the plot from Ephron in Ma'arat Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. And what else do we read about in this week's Torah portion? We read about finally Isaac finding his match, Rebecca, who, as his mother and father wanted so importantly, should have the kind attributes of giving, of love, that Sarah and Abraham so imbued Isaac with. And the Rebbe says, that's why, although we read about Sarah's passing in this week's Torah portion, it's called Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah. Because what was the life of Sarah? It wasn't a physical life only. It was the life of her aspirations, of Isaac continuing the way that she wanted so badly. And that's why, since we read about Isaac finding his soulmate who continues the journey that Abraham and Sarah started, and we read about the first acquisition in the land of Israel, which becomes the inheritance of Isaac and his children. We call it the life of Sarah. Mikhail Zaslavsky lives in Odessa today, and although 30,000 Jews were murdered, he continues in their way and he brings them to life through his love, his dedication to Judaism, to the Jewish people, to Am Yisrael, and to protecting their souls and what they lived for. May God bless us all to have lives that have meaning to it, lives that have spirituality to it, and lives that live on way after we might not be here one day. God bless you. Have a great day and enjoy the beautiful weather.